The Texas legislature files thousands of bills every session, and often those debates can get overlooked even on critical legislation. So that's why we've asked legislators to come to TVPF to talk about their bills to make sure you stay on top of the most important issues making their way through the Capitol. This is The Layout. I'm David Dunmore, Director for the Better Tech for Tomorrow campaign, and today I am joined by Senator Angela Paxton. Senator Paxton, so glad to have you on the show.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks, David.
Of course. Well, today we're going to talk about Senate Bill 835, and we were just chatting about this beforehand. We'll dive into kind of what drove you to file this bill and the story behind this. But for our listeners at a high level, this is your bill, Senator, to really just give a voice to the voiceless victims of sexual abuse as a child. So I'd love if you can start by talking about a man who I recently learned about, Trey Carlock, and I know this bill is being coined Trey's Law. Can you start with Trey and his story and how that led to the bill we're talking about today?
Absolutely. As a teacher, as a mom, as a grandmother now, the most important work that I've been able to focus on, I think, in the Texas Senate has been the sort of work I've been able to do to protect kids. And so when I became aware of this issue, it was a natural place of passion for me. I didn't know Trey. I know his sister. And his sister, Elizabeth Phillips, came to me with this. And her brother Trey was like a lot of other kids in the Dallas area. They grew up in Dallas. A lot of Christian kids. He went to Kanakuk camp every summer. And sadly, it was not discovered until later, but from the age of 7 until the age of 16, he was sexually molested by a director at the camp. In 2009, there was a criminal investigation that kind of blew this up, and some of the listeners may remember when that happened. But it was devastating because so many kids were at this camp and were exposed. And in fact, the prosecutor in the case that prosecuted this person that abused all of these kids said that there were probably hundreds of victims over the 14 years that he was at the camp. Trey struggled with what had happened. Mm-hmm. And you may know this as well. I mean, child sexual abuse it's very complex. Mm-hmm. It's obviously very traumatic, but many times the victims do not speak up immediately. They don't really have a place for what has happened to them. It's very common for it to be even later when they remember the abuse. It's something that the mind does to protect. So it was as an adult, though, as a result of this investigation, though, that Trey began trying to address this. And in the process of trying to address this with the camp, he signed what's called an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And this was something that Kanakuk had used. It's a business tool. Mm-hmm. There's lots of good reasons for any business to use an NDA, and it's usually to protect trade secrets and that sort of thing. But this camp used it to silence victims of child sexual abuse and silence their voice, which of course is really damaging because it interferes with their ability to heal by telling their story and working through things. It also prevents them from going to law enforcement. This is literally covering up a crime. And so that's what happened to Trey. In the course of all of this turmoil that he faced, he eventually, at the young age of 28, took his own life. Elizabeth has said the family still doesn't know what's in the NDA.
Oh, my goodness.
So that is the story and why this is called Trey's Law. And Elizabeth's courage and tenacity to bring something good out of something so terrible is really, it's admirable.
Yeah. Well, thank you for laying out that story. And, of course, one of the first things that I think about is you talk about the investigation revealing potentially hundreds. Part of the nature of these NDAs is we don't know how many other children this is happening to. And so I know for all these reasons and what you just outlined, you have a bill, Senate Bill 835. It's honestly one of the simplest bills I've read. But can you just walk our listeners and viewers through what does the bill do? Kind of mechanically, what is the goal of your Senate bill?
Yeah, it's a page and a half. It's one of the shortest bills I've ever filed. But it really just does two things. It prohibits the use of an NDA with regard to any child sexual abuse now and going forward, and it renders any previous NDA null and void.
Simply put.
Yes. And this is important, David, because, again, it's so important for the healing for a victim to be able to talk. This is one of the most underreported crimes for many reasons. It's even more underreported, we suspect, for boys because there's just an extra layer of trauma for a boy who typically has been molested by a man. The whole thing is unconscionable. And, it's especially egregious when you look at a place where parents were sending their children because they trusted. And there's even the extra layer of it's a place where you have spiritual trust. It's an extremely damaging kind of betrayal to heal from. So an NDA, it interferes with someone healing. But in addition to that, it allows and facilitates cover-ups at an institutional level. And what that means is that it facilitates continued abuse.
Yeah. And not to mention, entry into a contract with a minor who is very clearly already, irrespective of the horrible tragedies, oftentimes incapable of knowing what's in those contracts, but then preying on the situation to use that as leverage. So let's hear your thoughts, Senator. You led with talking about being a mom and a grandma and this being a near and dear issue. What's your hope? This bill becomes law. How does this change Texas for the better? How does this save lives and prevent horrible tragedies like what happened to Trey in the future?
Well, there's a saying among the folks that work in this space with victims of child sexual abuse or sexual assault in general. But the saying is no more victims. That's my hope with this bill, is that we will make a big dent in preventing there being more victims. But on top of that, my hope is that this opens up an opportunity for a lot of people who need healing to feel comfortable to pursue that. They haven't just been hurt. They are victims of crimes. And so that is my hope. Additionally, when Texas takes a step like this, there aren't a lot of states that have done this yet, but when Texas, because of the magnitude of what we're able to do here, we run blocker for the other states that want to do the right thing. And they want to stand on the side of victims, not on the side of perpetrators.
That's so well said. And this is usually the part in the segment where I'm supposed to ask, what is opposition saying? And I lay out an argument. I had to really think through. So let's say someone comes and says, well, the point of NDAs, it's a business tool, and we should allow the freedom of these contracts to play out between businesses and individuals. How would you respond to statements like that if you've heard pushback to that nature? What do you say?
I just say we should never allow a legal mechanism to cover up a crime.
Yeah. Yep.
It's easy.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any follow-up questions to ask on that because this makes clear sense. Well, I do want to ask you, though, you were mentioning how there really is a whole degree of divinity at play with this bill, and walk me through that, and especially what happened when you filed this bill, the feedback that you heard, and kind of the days and even really just hours following filing that bill. What was that process like for you?
Well, it was interesting. The day that we filed the bill, so the session had already begun. It was a Friday morning. I'd flown home back to McKinney, where I live, Thursday night, and like a lot of other legislators on Fridays, I'm like trying to catch up on all of the things that I can't do, and I'm doing my dentist appointments and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also trying to catch up with friends that I'm not able to see. And so anyway, that afternoon, I'm out running errands, and my staff contacted me, and they just said that the response was really tremendous, and that Elizabeth had reached out to our office, seeing that we had filed the bill, and just said, I want you to know that this has created so much hope among these survivors. And she said, I also want Senator Paxton to know one of those survivors was one of her students. So I taught at a private Christian school up in Collin County for 14 years. And my kids all went there, and lots of those kids went to Kanakuk. And I had no idea at the time, but one of my math students was one of those kids. And I don't know that it's just the one. It could be others, but I'm so proud to be part of something that's going to make a difference for him. Yeah. So this wasn't personal for me in the sense of I didn't have a skin in the game, other than it's just the right thing to do. Yeah. Yep. But almost immediately I realized that this was affecting people I knew and that I cared about. That evening, I had dinner with a friend, and as we're walking to her table, she said, hey, before we, get started catching up and everything, she said, thanks for filing that bill. Yeah. We have never talked about this, but that happened to me. And I've known her 30 years, and we've talked about a lot of things. It's not something that, she just, that was, there was a privacy about certain kinds of things. It's just, it hadn't really come up, and she's dealt with it in her own way. But I know that everyone is aware the statistics of child sexual abuse are very high. When you stand in a room, there's a really good chance that 1 out of 4 of the boys and maybe half of the women have been sexually abused at some time during their life. And so this affects a lot of people. Yeah. And, one of the things I know from being a counselor, sometimes just being able to talk changes the world. Yeah. And so that's what I hope. Yeah. I hope this really does change the world. I know it's going to change individuals' worlds, but this can change an entire culture in the United States. Yeah. And people can stand on the side of victims and no longer stand by as there is this sort of cultural, predatory posture toward children. Yeah. No more. Yeah. No more victims.
No more victims. Well, Senator Paxton, this is just one of many issues that you lead on in this respect, and I'm breaking script just to say sincerely thank you. And I hope for folks watching, statistically, there are going to be folks who have experienced this, that they know you are going to continue fighting in the trenches for this. And so we owe a debt of gratitude for you and your leadership on this. So thank you. And Senator, thank you as always for joining us on the layout. Any closing thoughts you'd like to leave?
Well, it's an honor to be part of this. Thank you for helping spread the word about this bill. They've already passed it in the House. And, I am looking forward to us getting this through the Senate. I think it is maybe one of the 2 most important bills I've carried. When I filed this legislation, I told my staff, this is why God sent me here. It's this. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm encouraged that we are hearing legislation to address child sexual abuse in all kinds of committees. We heard things in education just this week. Yep. With situations with teachers and students. And so we're hearing in there, we're hearing in criminal justice, and this will go through state affairs. And I'm encouraged by the awareness. And, once you see something, you can't ignore some things. Yeah. If you do, I don't know what to say about that. You can't ignore this kind of do the right thing. That's
right. That's right. Well, Senator Paxton, thank you for leading and doing the right thing on these issues. Thank you for joining us in the layout.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.